I'm Susan Birch, and welcome back to another A Healthy New Zealand podcast. And today I've got great pleasure, or absolute delight actually, in speaking with Issy Warrack and Dr Estrelita van Rensburg about their lovely new book, and I'll get them to hold it up for us. It's called Eat Well or Die Slowly. And while we're looking at that, I'll get you to share your cookbooks as well, please, if you would hold those up for us. So Eat Your Way to Health, and also they've also put together a vegetarian and seafood recipe book. So we'll get to talking about that. Now, I found this book absolutely delightful. It's got fantastic illustrations in it, and I rank it as one of the best nutrition books I've read. It's really simple, and I just mean in a way that can really understand the information, and it gets to the heart of all the issues. It's not too long, it's not too expensive, and it's on my really highly recommended reading list. So I hope everyone will go out and get a copy, and we'll put the link to Amazon in the show notes for you. So welcome to you both. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Susan. It's really nice to be here with you today.
Yes, we're really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I have been. I've been looking forward to it for a couple of weeks. So would you just, between you, share your story, how you came to write the book, and, you know, tell us a little bit about your journey?
Sure, I'll start. As people can probably hear from my accent, I'm originally from South Africa, where I studied medicine, and actually I specialized in virology. So I was a virologist in academia for many years, doing a lot of research on vaccines. And after that, I thought it was time to change, and I wanted to broaden my international exposure. So I got a job in the pharmaceutical industry, which actually brought me here to the UK. So this is where I live at the moment. And it was a big American company, a big stressful job, but I learned a lot of the industry that really helped me later on when I wrote the book. So what brought me to the low-carb world? Well, it was actually family and very close friends of mine that started suffering from the typical metabolic diseases or insulin resistance type of diseases that I didn't know much about, because nutrition is not taught in medical school. It's really a tragedy. And doctors don't really diagnose insulin resistance. I was never, as most of my colleagues, interested in nutrition. We always thought this is something that one can outsource to somebody else, and they'll look after the food stuff, and we'll prescribe the medication and we're the real people that makes the difference. So when I started reading about nutrition, I was astounded. I thought, my goodness, this can't be true. There's a bunch of weirdos out there that think that cholesterol is not important for heart disease, etc., etc. And I nearly stopped. But then I thought, well, you know, I've got a research background. Why don't I just delve into the science and start to look at it, you know, objectively? And the more I researched the subject, the more I got angrier and angrier when I realized how basically everybody's been conned for decades, believing what the authorities, and this is our governments, as well as the medical community, tells us what is good food to eat and what is causing disease. So what happened then is Issy and I decided, because she'll tell her story, to try this new way of eating, and we were absolutely amazed. I mean, I realized that I was insulin resistant. I had several symptoms related to that I wasn't aware of previously. These all disappeared. And we then decided it's time to actually put something together that we can share this with other people. And this is where our own program came from, our optimizer plan. But we wanted to move further. And with COVID, because everybody was in lockdown, we thought it was a good time to sit down and write a book. But it was to be a very basic book that anybody can pick up. As you mentioned, not too long, because one really gets bored with long scientific explanations, so that people can start reading the facts and maybe even give a copy to their GPs who are really not informed, just as I wasn't informed. So that's basically in a nutshell, Susan, where I came from.
Excellent. Issy?
Okay. Shall I tell you, I come at it from a very different angle.
Absolutely.
The layperson's angle, but it's a very personal angle. It's my own personal journey. I've actually lost count how many years ago, but I think it'd be about 4 years ago when I actually started to feel unwell. I mean, you know, I'm past what could be considered retirement age, but I'm still active and I still want to do things. But at that particular point in time, I felt actually as if my health was going completely downhill. I had no idea. It was as if the wheels had come off the car and I was just rolling down into more and more ill health. I was tired, agitated actually, as well. Couldn't sleep, you know, couldn't think straight. And then I had heart palpitations, which were petrifying. But nobody had any solution. The solution seemed to be more and more medication. Now, my body doesn't deal very well with that, luckily, I suppose. And I was extremely uncomfortable. And the other aspect was that, you know, we traveled within the UK quite a bit, flying, and you know, I kept passing out on the plane and just passing out. It was, you know, it was really uncomfortable. I had no idea what was going on, and I just felt positively awful. Anyway, went to the doctor. They said, well, you know, here's some more medication for your high blood pressure. That was handy. And it didn't get any better. I did actually eventually see a cardiologist, and I actually currently wear a full-time heart monitor. Which was an interesting experiment. But anyways, I came back from the doctors and I thought, you know, there just doesn't seem to be a solution. And Estrelita said to me, she said, you know, I think you should change your diet. Well, I was shocked. I was like, what was wrong with my diet? You know, I'd been alive for about 65 years plus. I mean, you know, there's nothing wrong with my diet. Well, actually, there was quite a lot wrong with my diet. So, and that's fine. It was a bit like being slapped across the face with a wet fish, I always say. But however, it was a realization call, a sweeping realization. It was a wake-up call for me to actually do something. And she had, as she says, she'd been researching, and I respected her research because she really does a deep dive into everything. So, you know, and a really deep dive. So she said, you know, we should. So we started to develop this program. I could hardly actually put one foot in front of the other. I mean, you know, we live in a 2-story house. I had to think about going up to the top floor. So, I mean, that's where I was, sort of health-wise. Anyway, this program started to evolve, and the results were absolutely amazing. I think I'll maybe stop there and let you sort of ask something else, but the results were phenomenal. Within the first 2 weeks, I noticed a difference. I'll tell you more later.
I'm so fascinated by the story. I'm keen for you to carry on with it. So would you tell us what sort of things did you notice? I'm presuming your blood pressure came back down to normal.
The first thing that I noticed was my creative energies started to sort of return. The brain fog.
Brain fog. Yeah.
Brain fog, I didn't realize that I had. I didn't actually know about brain fog before until actually I look back on it now. You know, I mean, we've written books since this. I would never even have thought of writing a book, to be honest with you. I didn't have the energy for a start. So within about 2 weeks, that I felt I was actually starting to click again. Something was going, oh, that seems to be working. The engine seemed to be working a little bit better. And I started to lose a bit of weight. I mean, I lost about 6 or 7 kilos. Not that I need to lose a lot, but I was a little on the podgy side. So let's be honest. But I noticed I had more energy. Wouldn't have been hard because I didn't have very much before, but I noticed I had more energy. And also I started to sleep better. The blood pressure took a while to come down. It was much longer.
About 3 months.
About 3 months. But we were monitoring it. I had a monitor which I monitored every day anyway. And so as a result of that, then I was able to come off all blood pressure medication, which I tell you was liberating. I hadn't realized actually how much in jail it felt. It was a little bit like a get out of jail card. I hadn't realized the side effects. And I really felt sort of, I had clarity in my mind for the first time in
a long time,
years.
And what happened to your lipids, you know, to your cholesterol and your heart palpitations? Did they resolve? And did your lipids change? Did they go up or down? Or
actually, the GP, the NHS here, they didn't monitor her lipids. That wasn't even on the card. So unfortunately, she doesn't have those results. But you can talk about
I can talk about the heart palpitations, which were petrifying. You know, sometimes actually I felt as if my heart was going to stop. And what I hadn't realized actually was it actually was missing beats. Because once I had the monitor in, I was able to establish how many beats it was missing, which is why I was fainting. So basically, the palpitations stopped after about 5 months.
right.
Took longer.
Yeah.
But I tell you, I mean, it's completely liberating when you just, you know, you suddenly don't feel well. You don't quite know what it is. And then I'd have the cardiology unit calling me and saying, you know, did you, you know, are you all right? Did you know that you missed several beats yesterday? And I hadn't a clue, to be honest with you, but I hadn't necessarily felt that well.
And so you haven't had any more of those fainting incidents, and you don't?
No, I haven't had. Now? I haven't had one for. I think it's probably. I haven't been counting too much because of COVID and everything. Yeah. But I think it's about 3 years. I've never felt better. I mean, I've taken up wild swimming. You know, I've got energy to do all sorts of things. You know, I'm luckily an active grandmother who's got 2 wonderful grandkids. So my life has completely changed to say 4 years ago. Completely. It's never too late. It's always my message. It's never too late.
It's the title of your book. I love the title, you know, Eat Well, Die Slowly.
I'm afraid actually I was dying slowly, but actually latterly it had become more rapid.
So, yeah, I was interested in sort of things like your lipids and your triglycerides and your insulin, but obviously nobody had measured those for you.
Absolutely. To be honest with you, I mean, now that I know what I know, it's a joke that they weren't measured.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, actually, my doctor wasn't, the cardiologist was very interested, but not to that extent. But my doctor wasn't in the least interested in this at all. They were quite flippant about my health condition.
I think Susan, this highlights the problem that we have, you know, with the medical community, because they are not looking for metabolic disease and insulin resistance. Something like the NHS here in the UK, you know, they've got very strict protocols about what kind of tests and so on they will request on patients. I think it may be a little bit more flexible if you have a private medical care and private medical services where one can discuss it with a doctor and maybe, you know, get profiles like that. So this is something that really highlights, you know, how there needs to be a change in the medical approach, you know, seeing and diagnosing metabolic diseases.
I couldn't agree with you more. And, you know, we have a terrible problem over here, and everyone's throwing their arms up, complaining about the lack of medications and things like that. And to me, I'm thinking we're missing it. 15 or 20 years before it actually develops. You know, if we would just run some insulin tests and, you know, keep a closer eye on triglycerides and waist circumference and blood pressure, you know, we've got that cluster of symptoms that just say metabolic issues. We can deal with them using diet.
Well, it's a very interesting point that you make there. I was talking to one of our clients on our program one day, and I asked him, it was actually his wife joining the program, but she wanted him to talk to us. And I could see that he was very reluctant. So I just started the conversation and asking, you know, how do you feel? Do you have any medical conditions that's of concern? And he looked me in the eye and he said, I'm completely healthy. I've got no issues. And I thought, wow, you know, that's not what his wife told me. So I said, okay, that's fine. I said, are you on any medication? And he said, yes, I'm on 7 different medications. I said, what are they? Well, he said he's got 2 meds for high blood pressure, he's got a few meds for diabetes, and he's got a statin. And so he went on. And, you know, I think this is also the perception of the general public out there, that as long as they can get meds to control whatever these symptoms are, they're actually okay. And it's like more and more Band-Aids are prescribed to people. The GPs believe they're doing their job, and the people think, oh, they're getting good medical care, but they don't realize, because the issue is not addressed, that the disease is progressing underneath the medication that they receive. It is just a relentless progress to ultimately they will die from the complications of whether it's heart disease or diabetes or whatever it is. And that is the whole tragedy of what we're seeing today.
And, you know, I saw Dr. James Mukey's post about how it feels to be an eye surgeon and remove someone's eye from type 2 diabetes when it's just so preventable. And so not only do people die from these diseases, but it's a slow, painful decline and with no quality of life. So it wouldn't be so bad if you just sort of went out. But that slow decline.
Yeah, I think, I mean, he's certainly raised the profile for you guys down.
Absolutely, brilliant.
But, you know, I think that's the other thing about our book, Eat Well or Die Slowly. The Die Slowly takes about 10 years at least.
Oh, much longer.
Well, yes, I mean, well, you're aware of the symptoms for the last 10 years. The build-up could have been 30 before, but...
So let's dive a little bit into the book. So, Estrelita, you have outlined really clearly the process of sort of metabolic damage, and you talk quite a bit about insulin and insulin resistance in your book, and then how insulin resistance underlies every chronic disease we actually have today, you know, all these diseases of civilization. So would you like to just talk through those a little bit?
Yes, I think that, you know, it really, we could go very far back in history, looking at human evolution and, you know, what is natural for humans to eat. And it's a fascinating subject. It's something that I'm researching at the moment. But we as humans have evolved, obviously, over millions of years, splitting off from the chimp line about 6 to 8 million years. And it's very interesting if we look at the gut anatomy of humans and our cousins, chimps and gorillas, it's very different because they've got a gut that is primarily there for digesting plant material. That's where they get most of their nutrients from. But during evolution, and there's a lot of discussion how it happened. We developed big brains and our gut actually got truncated. So the structure of our gut is much closer to that of a carnivore, if you actually look at the physical sizes. And it's because we have a long small intestine, and that's where we absorbed our protein and our fats, basically from animal material, animal products. We can't digest plant material so well as, you know, our cousins, great apes can. And I think this, so basically our physiology is very different. We need to get our nutrients from good sources of protein and good sources of fat. And that is basically animal-based material. But if we jump now to the 21st century and we see what people are told to eat, so avoid animal products, and you need to go completely vegetarian, plant-based products. This is a powerful message. But what people don't understand is that some of the very, very basic nutrients aren't there. We don't have the quality of protein in plant-based material. There are basic amino acids that's not there. And also very important minerals and vitamins that's crucial to support our brain and metabolic functions are missing in plants. And there's also toxins in plants and so on. So basically, because of this, from a very early age, and you know, even as babies and small children, our diet that we fed in the modern age is not suitable for our own metabolism. And what people don't understand is that, you know, if you look at youngsters, maybe teenagers and so on, they eat junk food day and night, but they look thin, they look healthy, they're energetic. So nobody thinks there's something going on there. They think it's all normal. But it's only when people hit about, say, 40, 50 years that all of a sudden, oh, I've put on all this weight, I just can't get rid of it. And then they have high blood pressure all of a sudden, or diabetes. And to them, it's, you know, why did this all of a sudden happen to me? No, it didn't. It took decades to develop, because high insulin levels, and that's what we call insulin resistance, really could have been diagnosed 10, 20 years earlier if the doctor just asked for that test, which is not a popular test. I mean, if you look at blood test results anywhere, they will do a lipid profile, they will do hemoglobin A1C and glucose, those to control diabetes. But do you ever see a fasting insulin result?
No. I get so much kickback because it's always on my panels that I ask for, and I just, what do you want that for? You know, A1C will tell the story, and I'm like, A1C will tell you when someone's had pre-diabetes for 15 or 20 years.
Exactly.
It won't tell you, you know, as they're evolving to develop it.
So we can say it's a silent disease. And I think most of the adults in Western countries, and I don't think it's just in Western countries, I think it's in the developing world as well, now are insulin resistant, which is frightening. So, you know, it's this conditioning that we've been exposed to of what to eat, the processed foods, the convenience. You know, we think we're a modern society, everything is there at the click of a finger. You can just run into the shop, you get your drinks, your food, you don't have to cook, you don't have to think about that. Somebody else is taking care of the food that you eat. So we're delegating responsibility for our health basically to industry, because this is what happens. They provide the products that make us sick. And then the other industry, that's the pharma industry, provide the products to treat the diseases that the food and drink industry predisposes us to. So it's a perfect, actually a brilliant a business concept, you know, if you think about it. And there are people that get extremely wealthy, big companies on this whole process. I mean, it's a very, very sobering thought.
Well, I think there's 10 massive multi-billion-dollar companies that own about 70% of all the processed food industry in the whole world, you know.
Yeah.
And then, like you say, then the pharmaceutical industry is treating the symptoms with never-ending pile of drugs to give people. So
yeah.
And we all just say, oh, it's just aging, I'm getting older.
Yeah, we expect to feel bad and sick when we get old. Yet if you look, if you read books, so we've got a very interesting book about the Scottish doctor that spoke about what life was a few hundred years ago. And I was absolutely astounded to read in this book that people actually lived much longer than we thought, and they lived healthily. He was talking about the census, I think, in 1796. And the census looked at the age of people in a specific village in Scotland. Well, the majority of the people easily reached 60, 70 years of age, but many of them went on to in their 90s. And I think the oldest person they recorded then was 117 years. Now, we always believe that people in centuries past had very short lives. But, you know, if the late 1790s and so on was before sugar became very popular and was introduced into the UK and other European countries. It was really during the 19th century that this massive influx of cheap sugar and processed grain and so on became, you know, a common commodity, and even something that people that weren't very rich, because sugar was only affordable to very rich people in the past, and you know, and then in the 20th century everything just boomed out.
And it's just progressively got worse. Would you talk a little bit about the role of animal foods in our diet? You mentioned about the essential, you know, the 9 essential amino acids, and they don't come packaged in the same way as plant foods. Would you talk a little bit about the difference and those anti-nutrients and the different bioavailability through the digestive system?
Yes. So there are a number of essential vitamins and minerals that is not found in the right form in plant material. I'm thinking about, for instance, iron. Heme iron is the form that our body can process and use, and that's only available in animal products. Plant products has got non-heme iron, and the bioavailability of that, for instance, is about 10 times less to the body than animal products. So that's one. Vitamin B12, for instance, is only found in animal food. Let's go on to fats, our essential fatty acids. We know that the processed food that's based on plant material today is very high in omega-6. And omega-6 is very pro-inflammatory. That's part of the disease pattern that we see. But the important fatty acid is omega-3. And omega-3, the active compounds is DHA and EPA. And especially DHA is very important for brain function, for brain development, for cognitive abilities, and it's absolutely essential during pregnancy for pregnant mothers, for the fetal brain development, and for neonates and young children, because a lot of brain development happens after birth. Yes, we do get omega-3 in plant, but that is the precursor to the two active compounds. And initially people thought, well, as if we take the precursor from plants, we're fine because our body will transform it to the two active substances. But more recent studies have shown that very little, if any, of the precursor is actually formed in our bodies if we don't take the DHA and the EPA in. So it's I think a real concern for people like vegans that do not use any plant products need to be aware of this, because even if they do take the precursor, they still may be deficient in the active compounds. Also, other nutrients that I'm thinking about, like zinc and so on, is also called a brain nutrient. And it's very high in seafood, for instance, and shellfish and so on. And if you look at, the presence in plant products, it's really very, very little. So all of these things, point to actually a meat and seafood diet really supports who we are today, humans with big brains and so on, and, intelligence. So I cannot see how anybody can think that a fully plant-based diet will be able to support us going forward.
No, and there's so many nutrients, so many other, we've got vitamin A with beta carotene, we've got vitamin K1, K2, yes. We've got choline and carnosine and carnitine and creatine, and although some of those are manufactured in our body, unless we've got the right kind of amino acids coming in the right quantities, yes. We're not really making sufficient, and then we're not getting them in our diet. And none of those are available in plant foods.
Exactly. And then there are, as you mentioned, also toxins and anti-nutrients in plants that actually prevent the absorption of these important nutrients, because this is how plants defend themselves. They can't run away like an animal, if they're threatened. So they have these toxins that protect themselves. And, also if we look at the farming industry, agriculture are really driving monocrops, especially corn and soybeans, and almost anything that we eat now, processed food, either comes from corn or from soybeans. And we know, for instance, in soybeans, there's even isoflavones, those are estrogen type of compounds, huge implications for our health. And it's even in baby products, baby formulas and so on. And you can go into the supermarket, take any of those. We sometimes have fun and just look at what is in it, and you will always see there are soy products, even the protein powders, the people that go to the gym and they want to build up muscle, just see what is actually in that tub of protein powder that they're using. And I think it's the marketing and so on and the misinformation that people think they're actually doing well for themselves. And that's the deception.
I think the media play a huge role in that. And for every sort of one story you might get about the value of animal foods, you get 9 promoting veganism as being the solution.
Yes, absolutely.
I did have a note to talk to you a little bit about soy. So now might be a good point to do that, and then perhaps we can move on to talking about your program and how it works. And Izzy, you might be able to give us some feedback on, you know, the process for you as you went through changing your diet and what happened and how you resolved any problems. But if you could address the soy thing, what would your main concerns be about the soy, Estrelita? Is that the estrogen, the high levels of estrogens?
Well, that's one of the issues, you know, the other is also it's got goitrogens in it, so there's an association with thyroid function, hypothyroidism, especially Hashimoto's disease, which is an autoimmune disease. And if you look at toxicity reports and so on, it's always stated in a way that's caused a little bit of doubt, you know. Yes, we've noticed this in certain people, and maybe people that's got a tendency to have underactive thyroid need to avoid these products. They don't really come out and say it up front. But I think that is the very, very powerful push of industry that, you know, has got millions of dollars, you know, for advertising and so on. We also know that soy is now the major component in many vegetable and seed oils. In fact, the consumption of soy products have dramatically escalated over the last 100 years. These are very heavy chemical processes. You can't eat soy in its raw format. It needs to be go through industrialized processes to make it palatable, even for humans. I mean, there are phytates, there are digestive enzyme inhibitors. There are so many things in soy that's not good. So, as I said, a lot of the processed food rely on that, or it's got components of soy in it. And I think that people need to be extremely wary of that.
Do you think
could I just, sorry to interrupt. Could I just actually add something there?
Yeah, sure.
It was suggested strongly in the 90s that actually I switched from dairy to soy products. I just tell this story as a layperson because some people may relate to it. Unfortunately, I listened to this person, and that's what I did. Now, I probably followed that for the best part of 15 years. Well, at the end of that, I had Hashimoto's and underactive thyroid and whatever. So when we came to look at low carb, the fact that actually I was able to eat full fat dairy was a little bit scary for me to begin with. I'll come to that later. But the fact that I actually wasn't on soy products any longer, I wish I'd never listened to that advice. It's the worst advice I was ever given. Because it really, I'm absolutely sure that that's why I then had, you know, hypothyroid issues.
And what about, can I ask you about menopause? Did you have any, you know, sort of perimenopause symptoms? And, you know, do you think the soy is involved in that process at all? Either one of you? You know, some of the
I think
menopause symptoms we're seeing today?
I didn't enjoy the menopause very much. I was quite irritable. I put on weight, and I had just horrendous hot flushes. Looking back on it now, if I hadn't actually been on soy, I think it would have been easier. If I'd been following a low carb program, it would definitely have been easier. I'm sure. I don't personally have any medical you know, opinion on that, but I just know from myself, I think I would have felt, I feel so much better now that I'm not taking any soy products.
Susan, I think that there's I believe that soy is one of the components that contribute to these symptoms in women reaching menopause and even menstrual symptoms. So just because it's so pervasive in the processed food. And we know about, you know, all the potential medical issues of that. So I'm convinced that it plays an important part.
Mm. I did a research project when I was at uni, which I looked at menopause, and it's really struck me way back then how women in undeveloped countries don't really have menopausal symptoms, but when they move to developed countries, they get them. And I've always been really aware of that, and, you know, really made an effort over my life not to eat processed food. And I sort of went low carb about 1998. So I got through menopause. I didn't even know I was having menopause.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Lucky you. Lucky you.
I don't know whether my diet had anything to do with it, or if I was just born with lucky genes. But,
well, I suffered heavily from menopausal symptoms. You know, I only started this afterwards. But I can just think, you know, as you're a shining example of that, what can be done. And women actually don't have to go through all of this if they just eat correctly.
Excellent. All right. Issy, would you like to tell us a little bit about starting this program? You talked about being a little bit cautious about it, how you felt about eating more fat, how quickly or how long it took you to adapt to it, and, you know, any kind of issues you had, both psychologically and physically.
Sure. I'm only laughing because I know what I'm about to tell you. I found it hard in the beginning, and I know people don't want to hear that, but, you know, we're indoctrinated by other people's opinions of what we should be eating, whether we actually totally believe it or not. It's in the press, it's invasive, everybody tells you what you should be eating. And, you know, this low fat thing is just endemic. So, you know, that was my first struggle, was actually to change my thought process, my mind.
Can I just interrupt? Issy, you were taught that you were fat sensitive, remember?
Yes, I done a test. Okay, yes, I'd forgotten about that quite deliberately, but yes, I did a test, and I'm fat sensitive, right? Okay, so I should eat low fat products. Good, right? Knowing what I know now, of course, that wasn't actually terribly good advice at all. But anyway, so I was fat sensitive. So, you know, if you've been told sort of for 15 years that you're fat sensitive, it's quite hard to go. Because I actually love dairy. Listen, my background, we haven't discussed it, but I was brought up on a farm, on a sheep farm in the Scottish borders. We ate what we now eat on our low-carb program. So kind of come a full cycle. You know, I think my grandmother and my mother knew something, and in those days, and I just wish actually we'd stuck to that. It would have been a lot easier. But anyway, so yes, I was allegedly fat sensitive. So in the beginning, the first few days, I really struggled with this idea of I could actually eat almost as much fat as I wanted. Now, I know some people can't necessarily eat as much dairy as I do, but however, I really struggled with that. It doesn't matter that I love it. It's just, it was just in my head. I had to get my head around this. I also, the other aspect was, I mean, we set up a program which was three meals a day and snacks. Now, because my previous dietary program meant that I actually ate every 2 or 3 hours because I was starving, I had also got into the habit of actually having a snack every 2 or 3 hours. So this was strange, but anyway, nonetheless, I had sort of a low carb snack, and that sort of lasted me. It took me a little while to adapt to fat adaptation, and also I was in the beginning I was wary of it, but principally because of this low fat thing and eating too much fat. Estrelita said, no, keep at it, you'll be fine. I wasn't necessarily the most willing patient, but and anyway, but after about 2 weeks, I actually got into the hang of it. And I discovered actually that I didn't actually need these snacks quite so much. I was enjoying the food. The food tasted delicious. I hasten to add, I wasn't for somebody who's actually now written 2 recipe books, I wasn't actually particularly interested in cooking. So that was actually another little problem we had to overcome. But what I found was I could become really interested in cooking if it actually improved my health and I was actually taking personal responsibility. And I learned, the more I learned, the less I actually shopped in the supermarket. So that was, the first 2 or 3 weeks were challenging, but I was excited because I was on a journey, and also after about 2 weeks I really did start to feel better. So I was in it. I was in. You know, I'm in. Estrelita will tell you that I wasn't necessarily the easiest patient to begin with, but I'm determined, and we got there.
So did you suffer any sort of the low carb flu that people often get, you know, the extreme fatigue and the carb cravings?
In the first few days I was tired, and I had a sort of what I might describe as a low grade headache.
Right.
Just a sort of just feeling as if, you know, you're coming down with something. It wasn't that severe. It's not like I feel today, but you know, it's just, you know, a sort of low grade headache, and not quite myself, but after, as I say, at about day 4, actually, my brain just cleared.
I think one other thing is, especially Issy suffered from a lot of muscle aches and cramps. So we had to up the salt content, because, you know, insulin obviously keeps water and salt in the body. And as soon as your insulin levels fall, you start losing, you know, the salt and the water. So that's how you lose a lot of weight initially. So we had to add salt to the food. And that's another myth, that we shouldn't eat salt because it gives you high blood pressure. So that was one of the things. And another thing that we add, the only actual important thing that we added that wasn't in the real natural food that we ate, was to add some magnesium, just for muscle function, and because she had a heart condition. So and that really worked very well and resolved the symptoms.
And often people find adding those electrolytes back in sufficient quantities does help a lot with
Absolutely.
adaptation phase for sure. And then, like you say, you need that extra salt. And did you include potassium as well, or did you just do magnesium and sodium?
Actually, just magnesium and sodium.
Right. Yeah. But that's a really good point for people. Because some people have experienced that for a lot longer. I mean, I know people who, you know, it'll last for 6 or 8 weeks sometimes, just that, you know, feeling of tiredness and fatigue and blah.
Yeah, no, I understand. I mean, and I respect that does occur for others. I think I was so excited that actually I was just so excited that actually I turned a little corner. I mean, it was a massive corner really, but I was just so excited that actually my mind took over from everything else. And I became, it was like being a child again. It was like sort of opening up your sort of favorite box of toys and having a look in and pulling something out. So I was so excited that actually I may well have felt it for longer, but I don't remember.
I love listening to your stories. So constipation, it's a good topic to be talking about, but that's another common problem that people experience. And do you want to just cover off, I mean, I think electrolytes help with that as well. Salt definitely helps in upping the fat intake. But do you just want to cover off whether it's something we need to worry about and what people can do about it?
Yeah, it is something. I think, you know, magnesium obviously helps for that as well, and higher doses of magnesium. I think drink water, and fiber may help for some people. I know it helps for Issy. So if there is a fiber product that some people, we advised in the beginning that people consider using some extra fiber until they settle in. So I think the more natural you can keep it, the better. But magnesium can be a powerful help for that.
And what sort of fiber supplement do you recommend? you recommend something like psyllium, or is that too aggravating? Or
Yeah, psyllium is something good to use. Is it?
I can't use psyllium myself. I have mild diverticular disease,
yes,
probably brought on by all the things we've talked about just in the last sort of 40 minutes. So I personally have to use I use a fibre powder, inulin, just a sachet a day, and that actually works for me. I've tried not doing it. People have said, you don't need to take that. Trust me, after 2 days, I do need to take it, and for me it works. So I've just found something that works.
Yeah. Because I know people on the zero carb diet, on the carnivore diet, because there's so little residue from the animal products. There's a lot of speculation that frequent bowel motions aren't necessary, or that they'll be very small when you do have them.
Yeah.
But I think any straining is probably an issue for people. So having a solution for that is important.
Have you tried linseed?
Oh,
Susan?
that could be a good option for people to try.
Just add it over. I sometimes use that when we have like berries and cream for after a meal.
And you just use the ground up linseed.
I just use them just whole.
Whole linseed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's an excellent tip. Thank you. That's great.
Yeah, and that really seems to work for you. I don't know why I haven't actually tried it, but
I think it's different for different people. You need to try and see what works for you. If just have options available.
Were there any other things that you came across, Issy, that you found a bit challenging in the beginning?
I'll be honest with you. I think actually the preparation of the food was actually probably one of the biggest challenges. We get used to sort of doing things certain ways, and in the beginning, I mean, now it's just completely natural, and it seems to take me half the time that it actually used to take me to cook a conventional meal before. But in the beginning, for me, there was just a bit of learning of how the recipes were prepared. I mean, gosh, it's not difficult. I mean, I know it's not difficult having sort of written these 2 recipe books. In that, most of what we write about, you can the maximum length of time it's going to take to prepare something. It's probably 20 minutes, but usually actually the preparation is all done in 5. I think it was just changing I have to remember my brain wasn't actually that sort of bright at that particular point in time. So everything seemed like an effort. Life was an effort. So actually reading what I was going to be preparing was an effort. So, I think that was part of the problem, was that, actually my brain wasn't functioning properly. So,
I think just to add on to what Issy says is the mindset. I think is the most difficult thing that we've experienced with people on the program, to change that, because the way of eating low carb is actually much easier than the traditional way. The cooking is much simpler, and it's actually, I can't believe, it's how quickly one can prepare a nice low carb meal in a very short period of time. The important thing is you do have to have the ingredients. It's planning, and I think it's the mindset and the planning that helps people.
Yeah, I think also that one of the things that we did was, and it actually suits both of our personalities, is we got rid of everything that was processed. We got rid of all processed food in the house, apart from I think somewhere at the top of some cupboard is some rice or something else. So we got rid of everything, so there was no temptation. Because I think that might have been tricky, and I see from people who are on our program that they actually do find that. So if it's in the cupboard, they'll use it. So we just either took it to a food bank, or actually threw some of it out, and just got rid of everything that came from those sort of central aisles in the supermarket. And for me, that was essential, because I know full well that my hand would reach out, and I don't eat biscuits anyway, but as it happens, I'm gluten-free, I'm wheat sensitive. So, but I know that there would be things that I could happily eat. So
Yeah.
we just had to get rid of everything. That would be my advice in the beginning. And I know it's difficult for people who have families, but families can also actually adapt to this way of eating, with some variations I appreciate. And so, yeah, I think for us, the aspect of actually getting everything cleared out was an essential. And I noticed this with people on our program, is that they're tempted.
Mm. I think people sometimes say to me, oh, it's a bit monotonous, what else can they eat? And, sometimes I have a smile to myself because they've been eating cereal and low-fat milk for breakfast and white bread and cheese sandwiches for lunch for like 30 years every day. And then all of a sudden food is monotonous,
I know. It makes us laugh. I mean, I think one of the aspects that I really, really like about low carb is actually to actually get the taste of food again. So that to me doesn't make it monotonous at all, because different cuts of meat, different fishes, they all taste different. So it's actually being able to taste that food rather than the monotony of what the manufacturer wants you to eat and their whatever they've manufactured to the, what do they call it, the taste sense or something. So as we're all eating the same thing, taste the same 365 days of the year. None of our meals are the same at all.
Yeah,
really.
I think your recipe book would be very valuable for a lot of people. So I think
it's just to get new ideas, just a different way of preparing something, maybe a different cut of meat or different kind of fish or shellfish or something to use. And that's what I think is excellent about recipe books. And I mean, we look at many ideas and you say, oh, well, I can adapt that and so on. And that's why, we thought it just to give people options. It's still the basic components, but just how you blend it and use it.
Yeah, great.
The whole aspect is exactly what you're doing, is actually being able to educate people one by one as to what they can and should eat.
And then trying to take into account individual responses and preferences and kind of situations.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. Which is so important. I'd like to talk a little bit about adding the fat. So there are different phases I find through the process. In the beginning, I think quite a bit of fat is fairly important. It certainly helps with that satiety, and people definitely feel more full for longer. But then over time, once weight loss slows down, what are your thoughts? I mean, sometimes I find we need to actually pull back a little bit on the fat because sometimes it might be a bit too much energy coming into the body. Do you find that? Or
I think for me personally, I spend much more time convincing people to eat the fat, because I just say, our brains need the fat to function properly. I think if you come to a point where you need to tweak it because they've lost the weight, they feel better, but there's this little bit of extra that they want to do, then maybe it's a point of actually reviewing what are they actually eating. And a carb counter will be good, and also a food diary for a couple of days to just see exactly, because we all drift a little bit after a while and add a little bit of this and this, and then maybe make a decision. Is it the carbs that's crept up, or what can you manage in that? So I think it's probably a time to review more what people are actually eating and what kind of modifications you can make. I would say that, of course, the majority of you can cut back on the fat as long as you don't bring back the cravings.
Yeah. I suppose one of the things I see that happens, I don't know if you've seen this, is the treat foods start to creep back in, but they're not carbohydrate-based treat foods. They're fat-based treat foods. So, you know, they were full of cream cheese and, you know, whatever other additions that go into them. And, you know, while I appreciate that, you know, we all really enjoy a treat, I do wonder sometimes whether that, you know, comes back to that mindset thing, you know, and so they're just replacing the carbohydrate sweets and treats with a keto style treat.
I think one also needs to, and we get asked about these treats very often. You know, if it's something that they buy online or in the shop, it's always good to look at the ingredients. What is in the ingredients? Because very often something that's labeled keto will have a lot of omega-6 and other carbs that's labeled as something else, because you know how many names there are for sugar. Most of them we don't even recognize. So I think one needs to be wary of that, because that can add, it actually adds carbs and omega-6 into your diet that maybe you don't need. So that's why we also tried in one of our cookbooks to give some treat options, and we don't believe in adding sweeteners. I know that's a big step for some people to take, but to have a few options where you can actually just use products without adding sweetness and so on, and use that as a treat. It may take a bit of getting used to, but in the end, we believe that you know, that's the best way forward.
I think also that I think after a while, people may have a tendency to become just a little bit complacent, because you know, they've hit their target, so they're going back to the mindset of, well, actually, I can really eat anything now. So as you say, I mean, you know, it might be a sort of masses of cream cheese something, because that was always their passion before. I mean, I've heard of people who just, for example, they think, well, I'll just have some natural yogurt. That's really good for me. Well, in its smaller quantities, it's excellent. In its larger quantities, well, you know, maybe not a whole tub. So, you know, and it's very difficult. I suppose we're quite disciplined, and one of the things I find about people on our program is if we actually teach them what the carb values of the foods are, they're more aware from the beginning. If they just kind of sort of guesstimate, guesstimates can be quite dangerous.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Do you sort of have a carb limit per day or per meal, or is it fluctuating depending on the individual?
We've actually adapted to one meal a day plus a sort of low carb snack that just seems to fit. We have, I mean, I'll tell you a sort of normal day is just, I start with coffee and cream. I think you have a bullet coffee, don't you?
Yeah.
Okay, and then I might have a piece of cheese during the morning. Actually, that's just really rather a habit than a necessity. We'll have a meal in the middle of the day usually, but it could be in the evening, just depending on social circumstances or what we're doing work-wise. We prefer to eat in the middle of the day. So we'll have, you know, sort of protein and vegetables and some creme fraiche or something, and berries and cream, just as an example. And then I personally have a snack. It's maybe a sort of a little bit of cheese and a homemade seed cracker, and that's kind of it. I personally tend to find that if I stick to about 21 grams of net carbs a day, it keeps me right.
Right.
But
others, of course, take far more than that. That's just where I am with my own health.
Susan, you're asking about our program. So our formal program is really limited to, or worked out to, not exceed 25, maximum 30 grams of carbs a day, teaching people how to keep it that way.
Yeah, so that's on the basis of 3 meals a day.
Yeah, so that's still yeah, spread over 3 meals. But that's our aim, and that's what we try to train people on.
So you're looking at about 10 grams of carbs per meal.
Correct.
Yeah, not more than that.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. That's just a great ballpark figure for people. So how would people access your program? I'll get those details from you and pop them in the show notes.
Yeah, that's all online, and they can register online. We also have gives them access to all the information, to the recipes, and we also have a weekly email support to all of them, pointing out, you know, issues that they need to be aware of. And as part of the program, they can also book private Zoom calls with us to discuss their own issues and so on. So depending on which program option they choose, how many Zoom calls they can book with us over the 3-month period. And then some of the programs also have copies of our books that's sent to them as additional information.
Yeah, and we also set up a WhatsApp for people who, because, you know, a sort of a Zoom call in a week's time may seem like a lifetime to somebody who's actually got just an issue straight away. We find in the first 2 or 3 days, people always have much more to say than ever after. So we just set up a little WhatsApp group, and if it's a medical question the person has, Estrelita answers. If it's just a general on the recipes or what type of food, I answer. We try to answer within a couple of hours. Well, it depends what time of day or night it is, but
yeah,
so
and they can also join Issy's Facebook group, and there's some good information on there as well.
Mm.
Yeah, we set up on Facebook. It's a private group, but just Low-Carb Edinburgh. It's just where people can feel comfortable about talking about what, and other people can just observe, and other people can participate.
And this is open to everyone around the world, of course.
Correct.
So, yeah.
Correct.
So anyone listening to this can go and tune in and have a listen.
Absolutely.
So just bringing that mindset back in with just those initial changes, how do you talk to someone about the need to make those initial changes? And, you know, it's kind of those mindset gremlins about, you know, well, I'm going to do well, you know, I'm going to eat well today, but then you come home from work and it's like, well, I deserve to eat this because, you know, the boss wasn't very nice today, or I've had a bad day or something. Do you deal with those kinds of issues with people? Or is it more,
Yes, we do. I mean, I think that, you know, we all have bad days. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, I like to think of myself as a positive person, but we all have bad days and things happen. And, you know, I always encourage people to, one, you know, don't actually beat yourself up if you've actually been naughty. There's nothing but it, you know, it reminds me, I mean, I was quite an active child at school. Disruptive might be a better way of putting it, but so I was always being told off for being naughty, and it's not a very nice thing. So you know, I try to be more encouraging. We try to sort of say, well, it's okay, recognize what the issue was, why you did that, you know, why you reached into the fridge to get whatever it was, or, you know, the cake tin or whatever, and say, okay, don't beat yourself up about it, acknowledge it, and move on.
I have this little motto, which is don't miss twice. So
yeah, it's nice.
Yeah. And I often tell people, you know, I say, look, if you couldn't brush your teeth this morning, you know, would you then go, oh, darn, that's it, I can never brush my teeth again, I've failed.
I know.
You know, you wouldn't. The next time, as soon as you were near your toothbrush, you'd be getting it out, having a good old scrub. So I think this is just falls into the same category. Yeah. So don't miss twice. That's I think
it's lovely. I'm going to use that.
Yeah, absolutely. Please feel free.
I think you know, if people know why they're doing it, it's probably easier to stick to the program. But one also needs to allow, you know, there are birthdays, there's special celebrations and so on. And I think if people plan for it and they know, you know, I'm going to have whatever it is at that occasion, it's planned for. But then to know that things are going back to, they need to change again. I think that's a good, more balanced way of looking at it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also the question we ask people is, you know, just remind me what it is that you wanted to actually achieve out of this. Because, you know, people need to, we need to remind ourselves. It's all very well having a great mindset, but you know, life does happen. Things happen. I mean, you know, somebody bumps into your car. We've all been through COVID, no matter which country we're in. You know, there's challenges there. You know, life happens. Just.
It does. And I think to your point about enjoying birthdays and celebrations is actually enjoy them and do it guilt-free and really savor, savor that, you know, that you're having a treat and then don't miss twice.
Well, I've got actually a very interesting story to tell. Last week, we were in London with a meeting with a group of women, and we had a nice picnic in a park in London. And we had takeaway lunch provided to us. And of course, a lot of things that we don't eat. So I thought, well, I'm just going to try the dessert because it looked absolutely delicious. There was a little bit of cream on the side, so I ate the cream and everybody else was looking at the cream. And then I ate a little bit of the, I think it was kind of a tart or something, and it was absolutely delicious. That sugar just went through me like that. And Susan, I couldn't stop myself. I finished the whole piece. But when after the lunch, I felt so bad because I haven't had that amount of sugar for a long time. And I had to eat protein that evening. I said, I need to go to a restaurant where I can eat good quality protein because I need to do something. I am feeling so bad. So it happens to all of us. It's that it happened to me because the feeling, I was absolutely amazed how bad I felt after it. I mean, enjoyed eating it, but afterwards.
You did. She said, you must try it.
I mean, I think it's just hardwired into us, and I think we all do it, you know, and I put my hand into that bowl of chips and think I'll just have one, and then I'm like, I have to go, goodness me, look at me, you know.
I know.
Really hard to stop.
Well, they're addictive, that's why. I mean, I love them.
Yeah, they're addictive. They are addictive for a reason. I probably better let you go, Sam. We've been talking for ages, but just a couple more questions. One is about dealing with friends and family members. You know, we're just talking about these occasions, and a lot of people really struggle with that. They get a lot of kickback from their families, particularly, you know, some of the comments I've heard, you know, where's the colour on your plate and all this kind of thing when people aren't eating their fruits and vegetables. What's your comments about that?
I'll be honest with you, we struggled with that in the beginning because actually it's quite hurtful. Well, it felt hurtful. It shouldn't necessarily, but you know, people say, oh, you know, that looks so monotonous, this looks so whatever, you know, and closer friends are actually probably, dare I say it, worse than people you don't know so well. Family look a bit odd, oddly at you and say, you're eating that. But actually, more often than not, what we've found is actually once they see what we're eating, it's actually it's what they think we're eating. That when you sort of say low carb, I don't know what they actually, I must ask what they see in their heads, because actually once they actually come and have a meal, which we haven't been able to do too much in COVID, but you know, once people actually come and eat and see how we've prepared it, they go, that's delicious.
I think it's a big issue, Susan, and I think what you have to explain to them that, you know, this is my decision and it works for me. I personally feel better by not eating the 5 colors on my plate or whatever. they will not agree with you. But, you know, as long as you say it works for me, you know, that's fine. What I experience is many of my friends and family were absolutely not interested. So the best thing for me was not to talk about it, but they could see the difference. And very interesting, after a year or so, a very good friend of mine that lives in Australia, out of the blue, contacted me and said, I want to go on your program. And I was absolutely amazed. And slowly but surely, you know, people start seeing the change in us, and then they start thinking, maybe there is something in it. So it's a difficult time when you're doing it on your own, and you know the family and friends are supportive. As long as you keep on, you don't have to talk about it. Eventually, they will see the change in you.
Yes, but it's still hard in the beginning, especially if you're very excited about it. It's like if you're very excited about anything, people try to pop your balloon.
And when you're really excited about something, you tend to want to share your excitement with everybody as well.
Yes.
And I suppose they might feel that you're being a bit judgmental about what they're eating also, you know, in your own excitement about what you're trying to do. So I suppose it could go both ways there.
It could. What we found is that actually people think that we're actually sort of you're getting at them, or you're being critical of what they eat. We're not actually. We're just excited and telling them about what we found. But as Estrelita said, actually, after a while, people say, actually, do you know, you're looking really well. You know, they notice. But you know, we tend not to talk about it with people who are not interested.
Yeah, definitely.
But in the beginning, it was hard. Let's be honest.
Yeah. I know that is a challenge for people, and especially for people where, you know, maybe the husband or the wife doesn't want to change, or, you know, the children and things like that. But there are definitely ways to work around that, and it's quite easy to prepare not a processed food meal. It's easy to prepare a little bit more carbohydrates into a healthy meal, and you just choose not to put them on your plate, but the kids can have some potato or kumara or squash or something along with their veggies and their meat.
Yes. No, completely. It's just at the beginning, I think everyone throws up their hands in horror. But it is easy. I mean, you know, if you want to have, you know, as you say, just actually don't have it on your plate. Everyone else can eat what they want, whatever you've prepared.
Everybody's just, all that fat. What about your cholesterol, you know?
I know. I mean, we see that, you know, when we provide something and it, you know, it's got fat on it. I mean, I still have challenges with fat. So for anyone who's listening, you know, be assured it's actually you can get through it, but it takes a while.
It's hard for people to understand that they can eat good fat, and they need to get rid of the sugar. Those are the two conflicting things.
And that just actually touches on a really important point, and it's something that I noticed you mentioned in your book. It's something I'm fairly hot on, and that's that combination of carbs and fat together. And you don't really want to combine them. Do you just want to sort of make a brief comment about that?
Well, I think you know, everything in this kind of disease boils down to insulin. And you know, if you look at how insulin responds to the different kinds of food, so your sugar and your carbs, very high in insulin. Your fat, almost no influence on insulin. If you combine the carbs and the fat, yes, the insulin response will be a bit lower. But it's just, the thinking should be, how can I keep my insulin at the lowest possible level? And I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but be aware that there are good fat and bad fats out there. And it's just understanding that the natural fat is, as long as you stay away from any man-made fats and so on, that's fine. If you eat what nature provides, I mean, you know, coconut oil your olive oil. Those are, you know, plant-based good oils, and then animal fat, and stay away from all the commercial fats that's prepared. I'm not sure that I answered your question, Susan.
Oh, that's still a great answer. I was really thinking a little bit about the Randall cycle and how the body can only process either carbs or fat, and when you have them together, that's where you get into a real metabolic problem.
Yeah.
And sort of set a metabolic fire. But if you look in nature, carbs and fat don't come together very often. Carbs come with protein, and fat comes with protein, but it's not very often that they're all combined together. So
no, very important point.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, one of the things that I've noticed is that I obviously I'm now fat adapted, so, and as I said before, I don't have a lot of carbs. I mean, as some people may have less if they're carnivore, but 20, 21 carbs a day is not a lot. But I find that if I do, and I've found this in the past, if I've upped the carbs, because we used a monitor actually to see what it was like, I went out of fat adaptation straight away. So that's an aspect. That's why I actually don't actually take carbs, because I know actually how it makes me feel. I can actually start to feel sluggish, a bit sort of woozy. And I prefer the alert version.
yeah.
I mean, Susan, we haven't spoken about ketones at all, but I believe that's the best form of energy for the body and the brain. So the brain, yes, needs glucose, but that can also be processed. You don't have to eat it. So the more you let your body and your brain run on ketones, the better for you.
And that's
which comes from fat, obviously.
Yeah, and that's definitely better, especially for anyone with sort of any dementia kind of issues, and and that's probably helped you with that brain fog, Izzy, as your brain can use the ketones.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite apparent to me. I mean, I can really feel it.
And I suppose that's where that intermittent fasting comes in, when people slowly wean off the 3 meals a day and the snacks, and then they eventually get down probably to 2. I think most people cope with 2 meals a day, or some time restricted eating, where they might have three meals fairly close together, and you have that big period where you are running on ketones.
Yeah.
I mean, just we eat within an 8-hour window, and fast within 16.
Yeah, which I think is a really nice kind of schedule, really, that most people can adapt to fairly quickly and easily.
Yes, in the beginning, I didn't think it would be possible. That shows you actually where my mindset was.
Well, I mean, I used to teach breakfast as the most important meal of the day. I mean, I did my lessons well at university.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, no, you don't need breakfast.
Anyway, Susan, all I can say is we've come a long way.
We have. So just one last question, a question I always like to ask, because I'm really worried about the health of the children, particularly worried about the health of the children in New Zealand. We have a hugely growing obesity problem, and how do you get parents to get their children eating better? Do you have any advice for parents?
I think it's actually it's a very interesting question. I think there's a lot of pressure on children from, I mean, I don't know what it's like in New Zealand, but from advertising companies, the media, etc., etc. You need to be cool, you need to eat this. To be cool, you need to eat that, and it's all around processed food. So I think that's very challenging, because it's actually being targeted at the children. I think in this country now you can't actually do that in advertising before 9 o'clock at night. But anyway, I think that the real key is to actually interest the children in food, and actually try to get them to understand a little bit. I want to tell a story actually about it, but because if if the child's interested, the parent perhaps will become interested. I think it's very helpful for the parent to be interested. So I think it's a full education process. I'm not sure I'm actually answering your question terribly well, but if I can just explain, one Easter, we were sitting having lunch, and my granddaughter, who was, I think, 5 at the time, and we were talking about low carb. And to be honest with you, I actually didn't think the children were listening. You know, they were kind of like this, you know, Granny's off on one again. So anyway, after lunch, she comes through with this plate, which she's made from colored plasticine, which she actually, then it's a plate of what I was talking about would be healthy for her lunch.
Oh.
And, you know, that actually got me thinking. I thought, well, if she can actually understand, so I had to ask for clarification on 1 or 2 of the items, but no, she'd put on the plate what we were talking about as being a healthy lunch, you know, low carb. And, you know, I think it's incredibly difficult. I think there's, you know, there's several aspects which I think one has to interest the children, but I think actually perhaps the key comes from actually getting the adults to understand it first, because they're the ones who are providing the food.
Yeah, I think without having the adults on board, Susan, I think it's so difficult because they provide the food to the children, and it's to get the mummies or whoever's preparing the meals to understand the importance, and that is a huge challenge. I don't know if you've got any suggestions.
No, you know, it's one that I keep working away at, but I agree with you. I think we have to reach the adults first, and then we have to find really simple ways of making food easy to prepare, not too expensive, and engaging the children in the cooking process as well. And that's one thing I do with my clients a bit who've got young families, is encourage them, you know, 1 night a week, each of the children get to cook with mum or dad. And, you know, it ends up being a great rewarding time where they're in the kitchen and they're talking and they're checking recipes and they're going to the supermarket and buying, you know, buying what they want to cook. And the kids start saying, oh, let's cook this next week, you know.
Yeah, no, that's very
no, I think it's great. I mean, we talk about this all the time, because I mean, it's all very well, you know, getting the adults sorted out, but you know, it's usually, we find usually it's people over the age of 40 who actually have a health issue, and that's why they come to us. But there's a huge gap of, you know, parents who've got smaller children, and you know that the natural thing is just to actually drive past, is to driving home, is to drive past whatever it is, and McDonald's or whatever, and pick up, you know, four you know, Mac dinners or whatever they're called. So I don't even know what they're called, but and that's meant to be a nutritious meal. Sorry. And you know, and they can actually, and a lot of things are said too about expense of actually cooking from scratch, but actually it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't.
I mean, if you buy for a family from McDonald's, for instance, and you see what you've spent for a drink and a burger or something, for the same money, you can buy some very good food for the whole family that's nutritious.
Yeah. I had someone, a diabetic, the other day saying to me, she'd ended up in hospital needing an iron infusion because she was so anemic. And she said to me, well, it's too expensive to buy red meat. And I said, well, you know, it's $15 for a kg of minced beef. And, you know, I said, that's going to last you, you know, how many meals? So, you know, I said, you're looking at a couple of dollars a meal. And that bottle of, you know, sugar-free soda you're drinking is $5. So, you know.
I know we do this. We did a price comparison, you know, of McDonald's and a drink and sort of homemade, and it's less. It is less every time.
Yeah, it always is less. Yeah. The other concern I have about the kids is this vegan trend, and what really strikes me is you've got adults who've grown up eating meat, And then they get to a certain age and suddenly they decide that, they don't, for ethical reasons or planetary reasons or whatever, they're going to go vegan. And so they introduce their children to veganism, growing children. And, that really worries me.
Yeah, it's the misinformation that adults start to believe, because that's fed to them every day in the media, on the radio, on the television, all sponsored by the big industry, very effective in changing the mindset. And I think one of the big issues in today's world is the amount of misinformation online and in the media. And people just believe that because it's on the radio, it's the truth. Because it's on the television, it's the truth. This is a big thing that we need to fight against. And that's why we thought, let's try something, let's write a book, maybe some people will read it. It's trying to push and say, you need to start to think for yourself. Don't just accept, what everybody tells you. That to me is a big challenge.
And I think one thing about this trend towards veganism, I think when I think of your beautiful country, and I think of the farming aspect of it, you've got everything there.
Yeah,
it's natural. It's all there. I mean, I haven't visited for a long time, but it's all there. Why would you need to go to plant-based foods? I'm sorry, I just it's a very powerful marketing message, as Estrelita says.
It is, and we're really hit by animal welfare and environment, and we've been talking for well over an hour and a half now, and I could talk to you about those topics as well. Maybe we could do that another time, because I should let you go. But the misinformation about animal welfare and the environment is another really huge topic that needs addressing.
Yeah, I think let's do another call on that, because I'm also very interested in that topic.
Yeah, I would love to do that.
Yes, I mean, I think there's so much misinformation about farming right now. So yes, let's do another one sometime.
Yeah, that'd be great. Hey, thank you so much for your wonderful time and for your wonderful contribution and your lovely, delightful book. And I'll make sure I get that out there and shared to everybody.
Thank you. We've really enjoyed being with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Susan.
My pleasure.